when Veer was diagnosed, I used to take him for therapy every week. And when I was sitting and in the waiting room at Umeed, I would meet all sorts of people. People would come in with their kids. They would come in from all over the city, all over the country. People from different backgrounds. And of course, you start talking and you realize that how very, very lucky I realized I was, how privileged I was. I did not have to worry about how I paid for therapy. I did not have to worry about how I came to the center. I came in a car. I did not have to navigate public transport. I did not have to brave the rains or the heat. I did not have to worry about putting food on the table because I was bringing my child for therapy. And that realization made me very aware of the fact that I needed to do something to give back. I'd worked with NGOs in the past, and so at that time, Umeed was looking for someone to do fundraising, and I had worked in fundraising in the past. And so I said, okay, this is something that I will do. Again, I was still quite fragile. I was still not a very empowered parent. And so it became very hard for me to do the fundraising. But I would watch therapists while they worked with kids. And I realized that a lot of what they were doing was stuff that I was reading about and trying to do with Veer at home. And so I very hesitantly went and spoke to Vibha, who heads Umeed. And I said, look, I want to become a therapist. And she said, okay, fine, because the team did not have so many therapists at that time. And so that's how this whole journey began. And 10 years, I worked with kids, all kinds of kids, all kinds of families. And every single time, I was so grateful for what they taught me, for all that I learned about autism, the condition, how brains function, how differently it manifests in different kids and different people. And then when I quit Umeed in the beginning of 2020 was the time when I started writing my book, because I realized that everything that I had read was from the perspective of the West. And India is so different culturally in terms of our families, in terms of our religion and superstitions, in terms of the food we eat, the family structures we have. And so I decided that I needed to write about it. I'd also reached that stage of my own acceptance of Veer and myself as an autism mom. And so I said, okay, I need to write about this. And so that's how Beyond the Blue was born. And I also realized that while there were services, I mean, ever since Veer was diagnosed to so many years later, services had crept up in Bombay, in metro cities, in smaller parts of the country, smaller parts of smaller towns and villages, where there were therapy services for kids with autism. But there was no kind of plan for what would happen after these kids became adults. It was like, would the autism go away? No, it wouldn't. So what do they do? And so I started talking about and writing about employment and how people should hire people who are autistic or neurodivergent. And so that's currently what I do now. I think for me, what an ideal world would look like is a world where all kinds of people who are different, whose brains are wired differently, to put it very simplistically, are accepted and given the opportunity to participate in every aspect of life, whether it is having a job, having an education, being able to navigate social spaces, being able to go to a mall, being able to go to a movie theater, to a nightclub, to have access to healthcare, have access to financial kind of resources and financial services, where society doesn't make it like like doing a favor to people who are neurodivergent or whose brains are wired differently. And it's not like, oh wow, we're doing this as a favor to you, look at us, we're so good. But it is part of just societal and systemic services that are offered to everybody. And this I know is a very idealized version. I mean, after all, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act was amended in 2000, as late as 2016, to include autism. It didn't include autism before that. Only in 2016 was it changed from 7 disabilities to 21 disabilities, of which autism was one. So I mean, we have such a long way to go. I do see some changes happening in little pockets, but it's really not enough. It needs to be a lot more. But I think that is from the government perspective and the systemic perspective. We also need to change our attitudes. We also need to change our mindsets towards people with disabilities. We have this concept in India, which is pity. And pity is so often confused with sympathy and empathy. When you say empathy, people think it's pity. And they really say, oh, I really pity you. But what is there to be pitied? Don't pity the person, give them opportunities. Don't pity the person who's autistic and say, oh, I feel so bad for you and your life must be so difficult. Do something to make it better. And really, it doesn't take much to make it better. It's like, if you see somebody struggling with their autistic child, just see if you can help. See what you can do instead of just looking and giving dirty looks to that person. It involves just different kinds of shifts in your mindset of just being a little more empathetic, a little kinder ultimately, and a little more mindful. It involves being mindful about the way you talk. In India, we have this horrible habit of saying, "Kya ye pagal hai?" What is pagal? You cannot label anybody who behaves differently as pagal or mad. It is they may have a kind of neurodevelopmental condition like autism, which makes them behave differently, but that does not mean that they are mad. It does not mean that they are less. They are different. And so just being a little more mindful about the way you talk, being mindful about the way you think, the way you act around people who are different, is also a large part of the kind of changes I would like to see. My ideal world is really a world where people who have neurological differences, people who are neurodivergent, who are autistic, are given the right to participate in every aspect of society and to participate wholeheartedly and really given a seat at the table so that they can live their life to their fullest potential.